On one dramatic afternoon in September 1870, the French lose the Franco-Prussian War to Germany. The Battle of Sedan sees Napoleon III surrender and the Second Empire fall. What followed was a political patchwork, a government trying to find and define itself. This was the Third Republic, which ran between 1870 and 1940. Despite a series of short-lived governments, the Third Republic was overall a period of economic growth and regional peace. This era, up until 1914, is defined as the Belle Epoque, the beautiful age of prosperity, technology, industrialisation and social stability. That stability is soon threatened when the Third Republic is shaken to its core by a scandal that showed deep cracks in the political and military systems and tested the morality of the entire country: the Dreyfus Affair. In 1894, a French Jewish army officer named Alfred Dreyfus was accused of passing secrets to Germany. The evidence was flimsy, the investigation poisoned by anti-Semitism, and the verdict was predetermined. What began as a wrongful conviction became a national crisis that divided France for more than a decade and forced the country to confront what kind of republic it wanted to be. In this season of Metro Stop, we are going to visit 5 stations named after 5 men whose lives intersected at the Dreyfus Affair. These men were brought together by the cause of the falsely imprisoned Alfred Dreyfus to fight for justice and become the most well-known faces of the Dreyfusard movement. To understand each man's involvement and impact on the scandal, we need to understand their background, politics and their worldview, and talk about their lives after the affair. Welcome to Metro Stop Podcast. Champs-Elysée Clemenceau is a station on line 1. When you exit the station, you are flanked by both the Petit Palais and the Grand Palais, and you find yourself on, arguably, the world's most famous avenue. I will cover the Champs-Elysées in a bonus episode, but today we turn to Clemenceau. Before he became one of France's most celebrated statesmen, George Clemenceau was a man on the margins. He lived through the birth of the Third Republic, watched it stumble through crisis, and understood its weakness better than almost anyone. He left France as a young radical, returned to a country transformed, and becomes witness to and critic of the Republic as it tries to establish itself. When the Dreyfus Affair broke in 1894, he wasn't in power. He'd been pushed out of politics and reputation damaged, and many considered his career finished. He has no office, no party machine, and no political future to protect. But what he did have was his newspaper, Le Roi. And from that platform, he and Zola became the loudest voices defending Dreyfus, using journalism to challenge the state when the state refused to correct itself. His involvement was not inevitable. It was a choice made at a moment when he had more to lose than to gain. Our story really starts with George Clemenceau because he gives us the long view. The France before the affair, the France that produced it, and the France that would be forced to confront its own contradictions. He is the Republican backbone of our story. George Clemenceau was born on September 28th in 1841 in the Vendée region, with a long history of royalist uprisings. He spent his youth among peasants, and his father, Benjamin Clemenceau, was a physician and an outspoken Republican and an admirer of the 1789 revolution. He had been jailed in 1858 for opposing the monarchy. Clemenceau grew up in a household steeped in anti-authoritarian politics, and with the conviction that the state is something that must be held accountable, challenged, and never worshipped. In November 1861, he moved to Paris to study medicine, but spent most of his time in the political clubs. He became active in an underground Republican movement, Agis comme tu penses, which means act like you think. This group published pro-worker, pro-revolution journals, which were seized by the police and led him to be arrested and imprisoned for 73 days in 1862. It's one of the first moments where his political principles collided directly with state power. After his studies, he moved to New York from 1865 to 1869, the height of the Civil War. He was struck by the freedom of discussion and expression. He saw a functioning republic with strong civil liberties, a contrast to France's instability, and he had great admiration for the politicians and the Reconstruction politics that were forging American democracy. When his father refused to continue financial aid, he taught in a girls' school in Stamford, Connecticut. In due course, despite the opposition of her guardian, he married one of his pupils, Mary Plummer, in 1869. They had 3 children, but the couple separated after 7 years. On the 2nd of September 1870, Napoleon III falls at Sedan, and the empire collapses in a single afternoon. Clemenceau rushes back from the United States to a Paris under siege, a government in flight, and a nation that has no idea what will replace the ruins of the empire. The France he comes home to is leaderless, humiliated, and surrounded by Prussian armies. In 1870, he becomes mayor of Montmartre, trying to hold his district together as Paris starves. When the Commune erupts in 1871, he refuses to join its violence, but he also refuses to support the government's massacre of 20,000 Parisians. The new republic, he realises, is already killing its own children. Clemenceau develops a consistent principle: the state must not abuse its power, even against the people it disagrees with. This principle becomes central to his stance on Dreyfus. The Commune is an important part of the Third Republic in George Clemenceau, and it will get its own story. But moving on, between 1871 and 1875, the National Assembly, elected after the war, was monarchist. They want a king, but they cannot agree on a dynasty. So the Republic survives by default, a temporary solution that became permanently only because its enemies were too divided to replace it. Finally, in 1875, the constitutional laws give the Republic a structure. A weak president, a strong parliament, but no stable majority. Clemenceau warns that this system will be pure chaos. And he's right. Between 1876 and 1885, as deputy for Paris, he becomes the Republic's fiercest speaker and earns the nickname the Tiger. He destroys ministries in a single speech. He exposes corruption, clerical influence, and military arrogance. Governments fall in months like dominoes. The Republic survives, but only just. Then in 1889, a general called Boulanger rises on a wave of nationalism. The wound of 1871 and the loss of Alsace-Lorraine to the Germans becomes a national obsession, and he promises revenge against Germany. Clemenceau fights him relentlessly, and the Republic survives again, but barely. Then, 4 years later, in 1893, Clemenceau loses his seat in Parliament. The Panama scandal poisoned public trust against politicians and, more importantly, Jews, and the Radical Party fractures. He is pushed out of politics just as the Republic enters its most dangerous crisis, the Dreyfus Affair. What was the Dreyfus Affair? It was an accumulation of everything that came before. It was a product of the political instability since the fall of the empire, mistrust in the shaky republic, the memories of military defeat, and the growing hatred against the Jews. In 1894, a note is found, famously known as the bordereau, a handwritten schematic spelling French military secrets intended for a German officer. Alfred Dreyfus had a reputation at his military academy, and he was not liked by the anti-Semitic intelligence officer and is accused immediately. He was told to confess or commit suicide, and refusing either, Dreyfus is put on trial and unanimously found guilty based on false documents and fabricated handwriting evidence. In a public humiliation ritual, he is stripped of his honours while the crowd chants "Death to Jews," and he counters with "Innocent, vive la France." He is sent to Devil's Island off the coast of French Guiana, and this could have been the end of it. But Clemenceau and others were watching and ready to strike back at the corrupt army. When the Dreyfus Affair began in 1894, Clemenceau was not yet its champion, but he recognised the danger immediately. A secret trial, a forged document, an army demanding blind obedience rather than accountability, anti-Semitism and the press baying for blood. The affair to him was not just about one man. It was about the soul of the Republic that he had spent his life defending. So he made a choice. Clemenceau would use his newspaper, L'Aurore, to publish a truth that would light a fire under France. Decades after the Dreyfus Affair, Clemenceau stands in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the same room where France had been humiliated all the way back in 1871, when the German Empire was proclaimed under the chandeliers. Now, in 1919, he is the one deciding where the treaty ending the First World War will be signed. And he chooses this room deliberately, not out of revenge, but out of symbolism. For Clemenceau, history only has meaning when a nation confronts its own past, its failures, its illusions, and its abuses of power. The same conviction that drove him to defend Dreyfus now shapes the peace of Europe. In the Hall of Mirrors, Clemenceau is no longer the fiery deputy tearing down ministries. He is the statesman of a wounded nation still fighting for the same principle, that truth, however uncomfortable, is the only foundation on which a republic can stand. But the next voice to speak out in defence of Dreyfus wouldn't come from Parliament or the press gallery. It would come from a man outside of politics entirely. A novelist who believed that truth, once spoken plainly, could wake up a nation. He could not remain silent. As new evidence surfaced, as experts whispered doubts, as the army doubled down on secrecy, Zola reached the limit of what he could morally tolerate. That's next time on Metro Stop Podcast. My main source for the Dreyfus Affair was a video by Sam Aronow. Biographies are from Britannica, and I've listed all other sources in the show notes. Music by Alex Productions.